Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How to Develop an Agile Workforce, the Key to Amazing Employee Engagement. We had another great response to this webinar with over 100 people signing up across all of our platforms. So we'll give it just a couple of moments to let everyone jump on and join the webinar. Given this new world of Agile and hybrid working, I'm sure some of us will be running from one meeting in the living room through to the bathroom, followed by a swift pit stop for a coffee into the kitchen. I know Lee's been running around in the office without any of the pit stops, so we've given him just a second to catch his breath before he joins us in a moment. But whilst everyone is joining the webinar, please do click the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom panel. It literally says chat, and say hello to us. If you can tell us who you are and where you're from, hopefully in the next minute or two, I can pull a couple of people out as you come in. Don't be shy and do say hello to us, otherwise it's all of us talking. We want this webinar to be really interactive, and I hope from all of the questions that I asked Lee around Agile workforce and Agile working, particularly the focus of how this can be a key to amazing employee engagement, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So as we go through, you've also got a Q&A box at the bottom. If you click on that Q&A box and open that up, throughout the conversation, please do put all of your questions into there, because ideally we'd like to be led by your questions. Now is your chance to ask an expert in the field about what they're doing in that environment. So Joe Bohan, lovely to see you from Wigan and Lee College, one of our advocate partners. Thank you so much. I hope you and Louise and all the team are well. We've got Jackson Damas. Hi, lovely to see you from tuning in from Birmingham. Hope it is sunny up in Birmingham way. We're currently in Manchester and Lee is in Bolton. It is not very sunny today, but we'll go from there. So we've got Lindsay George. Hi, I'm Lindsay from North Wales, and I'm a HR partner and a big fan of Agile working, and therefore a big fan of Lee, I'm sure, as we come on to that conversation. Fingers crossed. Lovely to have you on the Zoom call today. Thank you so much. Okay, let's make a start, shall we? Welcome, everyone. My name is Mike Brennan, co-founder and CEO of Stribe. And just a little introduction for those of you who are joining Stribe session for the first time and not aware about who we are and what we do. At Stribe, we help teams to be heard, taking their small insights day by day, leading to real change that matters. We work with both private and public sector organizations, small and large, and our platform enables organizations to collect real-time insights from their people, which help organizations to achieve their key priorities. Most recently, we supported one of our customers to become a Best 100 organization to work for 2021 with a 3-star world-class rating for employee engagement. And it's actually linked to Joe Bohan and the team from Wigan and Lee College. Joe, I'm sure you won't mind me saying this, but by using Stribe, you're able to listen to your staff in a more regular way. And by collecting real-time employee insight, you're able to reduce staff stress-related absence rates by as much as 7.5% and reduce their stress-related attrition rates, by 3.7%, whilst increasing employee satisfaction and engagement. So a huge well done to you and the team. As part of our approach, we like to partner with the most forward-thinking organizations and leaders of people and talk about the most current and challenging topics which relate to employee engagement, well-being, communication, and experience. Today, we'll be exploring how to develop an agile workforce and focusing on how this can boost employee engagement. Hopefully with Lee's conversation, we're gonna get some real honest truths about the challenges and everything that comes with that. So I hope you enjoy the next 40 to 50 minutes as we aim to provide you the number of key insights, maybe practical tips to take away on the topics of engagement and indeed agile working. As I mentioned right at the start, as people were joining, I have lots of questions to ask our fantastic guest speaker, who I will be introducing properly in just a second, who's on my left, but we'd like you, our audience, to ask as many questions as possible. You will see there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom panel. If you click on this link, you'll be able to ask us a question, and we'll do our best to get through as many of these questions as possible. As I mentioned, this is an expert in the field who will give you an honest and transparent view about what they're doing, what the challenges are, and hopefully learn something as we go through this journey. If you do see a question that you want to be answered quicker because you're about to ask it yourself, just click on the upvote button. It'll take it at the top of my list. The more upvotes a question gets, the faster we'll answer, like a very good ride at Backpool. It's as simple as that. So on to the serious note. how to develop an agile workforce, the key to amazing employee engagement, and what a topic. I'd just like to set the scene about what it means to me and my understanding of it, and then we'll come in to introduce Lee. So agile working for me is a way of working in which an organization empowers its people to work where, when, and how they choose, with maximum flexibility and minimum constraints to enable employees to optimize their performance and to do their best work. Workforces with the flexibility to pick their own schedules and place of work are up to 17% happier and more engaged than those in more traditional working environments. The complexity and the fast pace of change in today's business world have put a premium on the ability of organizations to respond to change in a speedy and effective manner. According to a report by the Economist Intelligence Unit in 2009, nearly 90% of senior executives surveyed across the world believed then that organizational agility is critical for business success. And these findings resonate with the responses to the CIPD Labour Market Outlook, where smart working was named as one of the top tactics to improve productivity by 56% of organizations in the UK, including 60% of organizations in the public sector. The need to increase organizational agility is also driven by changing needs of the workforce. An increasingly diverse working population means that people require and expect enhanced flexibility to help them balance their lives at work and at home, manage a range of different care responsibilities in some circumstances, and even transition into retirement. The interest in working in a more agile way has the potential to offer organizational practical solutions to not only meet the evolving needs of their workforce, but also control operational costs while finding competitive advantage in greater customer focus and innovation. Previous CIPD research provides evidence of the business benefits observed by some organizations that introduce flexible working, flexible physical work environments, technology supported with collaboration, and management practices and empowering managers that are conducive to greater employee autonomy and engagement at work. And most recent case studies from the Agile Future Forum summarize further reasons for rethinking how businesses operate in the present, plan for the future, and organize their workforce, workplace, and work processes. However, despite the proven benefits for employee engagement, it's important for organizations, and this is a key point for us today, I think, Lee, to develop an agile workforce that works for the organization in the right way, and also one that works for everybody within that ecosystem. So today we are joined by Lee Fallows, Assistant Director of HR and OD of Bolton Council, and with his wealth of experience, we're going to be exploring how to develop an agile workforce and how this can boost employee engagement. Lee is responsible for close to 6,000 staff across many different departments, roles, and services. And I first met Lee a number of years ago as we began to develop the framework of Stribe's employee engagement software well before we even knew what COVID was. So with Lee's insight and support, we've developed the future employee engagement we believe and a digital solution specifically designed to support the communication and engagement of agile workforces. Lee is also one of Stribe's customers, and after working very closely with Lee throughout the pandemic, I'm delighted to call him a good friend from all of the conversations that we've had over time. Lee, welcome to our webinar. You now can come off mute after my very long introduction.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm good, I think. Yeah, I'm very good. I was just reflecting, and I noticed one of your customers was Joe. I think it was Joe from Wigan and Lee College, where I did my CIPD many years ago. So she's partly, or her organisation is partly responsible for how I've ended up in this predicament, I guess, working in HR. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, there's Joe saying excellent. So you both have to catch up for a cup of coffee at some point. It's a very small world. Lee, I know I've given you a really fancy and fluffy introduction per se, but it'd be great if you could introduce yourself to our wonderful audience who are really, clued up on these topics and probably sharing the same challenges yourself. And maybe in a few words, just share your journey of how you got from Wigan and Lee College to Assistant HR and OD Director.
No problem. Well, thank you, first of all, Mike, for inviting me along, and welcome, or hello, everyone, and nice to meet you. I can't see anyone, but I'm sure you can see me. I need to just, Michael knows this story already, but about a week ago, I've lost my glasses and I've still not found them. So I apologise. These are from Poundland across the road from the town hall where I work. So it's not my usual, but I'm blind as a bat without them. So I need something. My journey, I've worked in HR OD, health and safety, managed a variety of teams for over 20 years. I set off as an apprentice at Bolton Council. This is me living the dream. I wanted to do HR when I left school. And I have worked in a variety of positions all the way through HR, from setting off as a HR administrator. I worked in the recruitment and selection teams, and I've slowly progressed my career through that, through lots of opportunities, hard work and support and development from managers. So I'm very passionate about staff engagement, giving people the opportunity to develop their skills and careers. And obviously, I think what I would say is the last 18 months have been possibly the hardest part of my career that I've had to date. Just to give you some context in terms of how hard it was, I was appointed into my role as Assistant Director on the 17th of March, and we went into lockdown on the 19th of March. I have only known 2 days of non-COVID world since I was appointed. So in terms of what we're talking about, staff engagement and how we do that in a new agile working, I have lived and breathed this and nothing else for the last 18 months or so. So a bit about me.
Brilliant. Yeah. And thank you. And we all kind of gulped at that moment of the 17th transition for you. Welcome to the new job. Go.
Away you go.
It goes without saying that the last 18 months have been hard for everyone individually and particularly for organizations. But how did you and Bolton Council initially react to that moment of, I suppose, lockdown, pandemic, that first step on that 24th of March?
Yeah. Well, I think it would be fair to say, like most organisations, it still is a significant challenge. I'm sure some of the people on the call work for local authorities, but just to give you some idea of context of what we were dealing with at that point. As a council, we employ around 3,500 staff within the council, including our schools workforce, upwards of 9,000 employees. We work across over 650 different buildings. We deliver services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. Anything from school crossing patrollers, health and social care staff, refuse collectors, enforcement officers, a myriad of all kinds of different working practices and patterns. I suppose on the day we took the decision to send all non-essential staff home, it was a leap of faith. At that point, we had around 30 staff in the council that worked permanently from home. Literally overnight, we had over 1,000 people working from home. That meant we had probably the vast majority of staff with no ICT kit, no access to telephony, no work, actually. I mean, that was kind of, we had Skype on our desktops, but had never used it as an organisation. So the first thing was a massive OD piece in terms of giving people the skills to do that. As a manager, I mean, I'd already worked within the team, so I knew the staff. I think what was a challenge was you're dealing with a massive service pressure at the same time as staff were experiencing a real personal thing around health and well-being, not only of their own feelings, that of their family and the children, because it was the unknown, and I think that was possibly one of the hardest challenges. Running alongside that, though, at the council, 2/3 of our workforce have never worked from home. They've been in every single day of the pandemic. So not only have we got an infrastructure where a majority of the staff are sent home, 2/3 of our workforce are working in areas. So that was a very difficult period to manage that, and especially when you're dealing with staff who are working in adult social care, who are, as you will remember at the time, working in care homes where we knew that COVID was a massive pressure for us. We had real problems getting PPE. We were trying to redeploy staff out of roles. So how did we react to it? I would like to think that from outside we were like a swan and we looked very graceful on top of the water, but I can 100% promise my feet were paddling like hell underneath the water, as were a lot of other people's. It is a time I now look back on with some pride that we got through it. I would say it has left a lasting legacy, though, in terms of the organisation and how we feel after it, because it was, like I said, was a tough period, and it still is a tough period for us. But yeah, I think that would be my reflections of it.
Yeah, no, and I think it's fair to say, like you say, the majority of staff had to double down, and as in our conversations, in some cases had to redeploy to areas where they were not aware of, and be upskilled within days and weeks to support other services they popped up and down.
Absolutely, and I probably didn't realise at the time, because we were all a bit rabbit in the headlights if we was just dealing with the here and now. But there were staff who experienced feelings, and it's only afterwards, as people have started to come back into the workplace and we engage with them, of the feelings of actually being sat at home doing nothing was not a good place for a lot of people, because they felt guilty about the fact of the people who were in, and they wanted to do something. And I think we've just not unpicked all that with people yet. There's a lot of really conflicting feelings, and I'm sure, like most organisations, it has caused some issues within teams as well. Whereas, we've worked all the way through the pandemic. You've had a nice time. And actually, no one's had a nice time. No one's had it's been challenging for different reasons at different times. And I think we're just on our journey of understanding what that means.
Yeah, it's really important. And I think one thing I'd like to touch on before we start to go into, I suppose everyone's interested in the future and what we're doing and how that can work. Just in that particular time, and this comes up to right to the present day, how have you managed those changes with your teams? How did you keep them happy, not feeling anxious? Just talk us through some of the practical things you did in them moments under the swan.
I mean, one of the biggest challenges we've faced is such a diverse workforce is how we've communicated with staff. So we have employees who will work an hour a day in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, cleaning a school. We have people who then might come on a night shift in a residential care home at 10 o'clock at night. And how do you communicate with such a diverse range of staff? I was already acutely aware from an organisational point of view, hence why myself and Mike were already having conversations about what Stribe could possibly offer. Prior to the pandemic, what that crystallised literally overnight is we've got a real challenge on some of this, of how we communicate and engage with our workforce that is so diverse. The majority of our roles have no need for technology. So if you are a cleaner, if you are a refuse driver, you do not need access to a laptop currently. And that was a massive challenge for us. And what I'd say, we have evolved, and we are continuing to evolve what that is. So we have made a massive commitment, in purchasing Stribe, in purchasing. I see every single member of our workforce, all 3,500 staff, now have a bolton.gov.uk email address. We have purchased everyone Microsoft licenses so that they can download Teams and SharePoint and Word on their personal devices, whether that be a mobile phone or a laptop or both if they want, so we can communicate and push information out to them. At the start, it was very much what I would call slightly agricultural. We're a traditional hierarchical council, so messages come top down. Managers were expected to communicate with staff literally via telephone. So if you managed a team of 80 staff, you would be an urgent message needed to get out, and you weren't on emails, or we couldn't access. You were asked to ring 80 members of staff. That is how basic it was at the start. And that comes with a risk, because how do you make sure that your 10 managers or 20 managers that are ringing their 80 staff are giving the same message and giving the same message to all those staff? And it was a huge challenge for us, I'll be completely honest.
I guess one of the biggest part of the pandemic has been that the need for digital transformation, and the business case has been explained throughout that journey of a must-have rather than how do we justify this. It's just necessity.
Absolutely, and off the back of what we have done, we now have appointed, and this is he works in my director, an assistant director for transformation. We have a digital theme that is now running through the council. I am the lead for the culture theme around digital, and Stribe is a key part of that. But it is about how do we communicate, how do we engage, how do we ensure that staff are digitally enabled, they have the skills, because that's the other part of all this, is it's all right giving everyone technology. We don't know if everyone can use the technology. And if you've seen myself and Mike 10 minutes before we came on this call, while I was having an urgent lesson of how to use Zoom or how to access Zoom because we don't use it, and that's the challenge of all this, is it's all right giving everyone that. But for everything you do, there is another knock-on effect that you've got to think about.
So how do you manage that partly? Talk us through kind of your thinking, your role and your actions from something like that, because that's a really important part, isn't it? How do we, implement organizational development to support with digital transformation? That is a current problem for everybody. What are you doing?
Well, we are doing a lot of work through our organisational development team that I manage. So Ruth Seddon, who works in my team, is doing a lot of work around digital inclusivity. That's one of the key themes that we're doing at the moment. We are looking at doing staff surveys in terms of understanding what are the current skill sets that our workforce have or don't have. What can we do to plug them? And there's a real irony about this, because the first thing that we're doing around digital skills is actually writing a physical letter and posting it to people about, can you tell us what your digital needs are? Because there's no point emailing people or sending them digital information if they don't know how to access it. So we've gone back to basics, and I've got to be honest, it's an ongoing battle I have with this organisation, and I'm sure lots of organisations that work across many buildings, is everything we do can become very town hall centric if we're not careful, as I call it. Everyone who works in the town hall pretty much by default will have an access to a laptop or a PC. They're not the people who are digitally excluded, and we know it's the people who do not have access to it, and that's the problem we're having. Is how, or it's not a problem, it's the challenge we're having, is how do we engage with those people and give them the opportunity to access all the online health and well-being and on the online staff benefits that we have, because we've kind of gone online but only to a very small cohort of staff, and there's a real risk that we're excluding a big chunk of our workforce.
I think it's a really important point just to pause on for the audience there, just in terms of reminding ourselves, just because we brought all of the different points of technology, this has to filter into an employee engagement, communication, people-led strategy. It can't just be a case of implement the technology and assume, and then look at these rates such as survey response rates or staff engagement rates or whatever that might be, and then almost blame the employees. We have to assume that everybody can't use this technology from start to finish in whatever you're implementing, right? To then be able to build that framework.
Yeah, and I can give you a real live example of something that I was dealing with literally before I came on this call. So we're currently in the process of upgrading we use Oracle as our system, HR payroll system, and we're moving on to a cloud-based system, which is fantastic in terms of you can get an app on your phone, you can do all sorts of things that allow us to bring in self-service, all that. But we're going to move towards online pay slips. So the plan is we will switch off paper pay slips for people. And this is the bit where you have to have all the connectivity of doing that, because if it was left to payroll, they would switch off pay slips now and everyone can access it. I'm coming on it with a digital culture kind of thing, saying you can't do that, because we've loads of staff who won't even know what Oracle, they've never been a need to use Oracle. So you can't just switch something off. It has to be a journey and it has to be planned. So I understand the urgent push for transformation, but for me, it has to be done in the right way. It has to bring staff along on that journey. Otherwise, you fail at day one, as far as I'm concerned.
And we talked about that a lot, isn't it? It's getting everybody bought into that journey. And even though the pandemic has sped everything up, it's almost like we've got to be careful not to have all of the answers right now. We're in kind of a testing transition period and a fluid journey where nobody knows what the future holds, and we can't say yes, that's absolutely the way to work, or that isn't the way to work, because we're all figuring that out. I generally believe.
And I keep coming. There was a piece of CIPD research done around agile working, and so CIPD is the HR kind of industry, what regulates everything. But there was one quote that I was stuck in it, and it was said that now is not the time for decisions; it is the time for experimentation. And that's really what we're on in terms of agile working, the digital strategy, lots of things. Is when we're experimenting, and we will refine things as things move along that journey.
Yeah.
We didn't, we did things at day one what we thought was right, and you look back now and you think, well, that was a bit of a stupid decision. Why did we do that? But hindsight's the best superpower ever, isn't it? If we all had hindsight, we wouldn't do half the things we do, would we? So
yeah, that is so true. That is so true. And I think that's a really interesting transition to get to some of these points about what you're doing now. Because I know a lot of the audience will be thinking they're going through these thoughts of how they can structure their workforce. And we always joke about the multitude of words that do have different meanings, such as agile, such as hybrid, such as flexible, as we always laugh about. And they are in their own right structured in different ways. But let's start to go on that kind of journey of where you're up to now. What the agile workforce of Bolton, what's your views on it? Where are you and what are you experimenting with at this stage?
So I'll initially come back to my earlier point about not being town hall centric, because we have two very distinct sets of workforce around agile working. We have people who can work in an agile fashion, hybrid fashion, whatever you want to call it this week, in terms of a blended approach between home and office. As I said, 2/3 of our workforce, that is not an option for. And we need to, and so I am very mindful that yes, we are doing some work around what an agile office environment might look like, but what are we doing around the flexibility for the wider workforce? And clearly you can't, if you work in a school, you can't have flexibility between 9 and 3:30, but there are other benefits of working in that. So I'm taking a very inclusive approach to agile working. The council's position as of today is that most staff are now working in a blended approach. So most teams, I would say it's roughly a 50-50 split, but that is it's not like you're on a counter and you've got to be in 2.5 days a week. It might be that you're in 4 days, 1 week, one the week after, but over a period of time, you would be in roughly 50-50. That's working really well to an extent. I think, has it been perfect? No, it's not at all. We've had issues, we've had all sorts of stuff. I think we're beginning to find a bit of an equilibrium now, as I call it. Everyone's kind of a bit more comfortable with it. We've had lots of people who were resistant to coming in. We've had lots of people who were desperate to get back to the workplace. And I'm sure everyone on the Hill have had exactly the same experiences. We haven't got a policy in place on this. We are developing one. I'm a HR person, which I'm a bit of an enigma on this. I'm a HR person who hates policies, because I think my view around policies they are used by a minute number of the workforce. So if I use, disciplinary policy or a grievance policy or a sickness policy, they'll probably be used by 1 to 5% of the workforce. Agile working, I'm more around having a framework or a set of guiding principles rather than a policy. And I think the general view will be that you work from home for the right reasons, you come into the office for the right reasons, but the teamwork ethic, the team meetings have to take place, one-to-ones have to take place. We need to really strengthen the performance management part of managing staff in an agile way. And there's some of that, but there is a pressure to get, pressure is not the right word. There's a desire to get something done. I would say there isn't a pressure to necessarily fix something that is not broken at the minute, whilst we just work through it. But I appreciate I'm also a bit of an outlier on some of what the other GM authorities are doing as well. Some other GM authorities have gone, this is our agile policy, this is how we will work. We're taking a more let it evolve and let's see where we get to approach.
How are you, if you are, or how are you going to measure the agile workforce experiment in terms of understanding whether your staff are engaged or whether they are happy and feeling safe in their role?
We currently have the traditional biannual staff audit, staff survey, but again, that's a full staff survey, and that was really where things, and I feel like I'm doing a sales pitch for you now, but that's where Stribe really in essence comes into its own in a bit, in that we can do pulse surveys, we can get real-time data and insights back about what staff are feeling, what's working well, what's not working well, what we can refine. We have a very strong recognised group of trade unions that work with our organisation, who have the voice of the employee. We're doing a lot of work with them and engaging with them. And we are trying to be brave and not be worried about making mistakes. I'm very relaxed about doing things and refining them and not getting it right first time. And that's a real difference for us, because normally we do something and we want it to be perfect at day one. This is such a leap of faith on what we're doing that we have to be able to be brave and to realise that actually it's not, and it will not work for everyone. And that's the biggest challenge around the agile working for me, and especially in an organisation like this, is even, and I'll give you real life examples within my team. So the HR service I manage has a schools team. It has an adults team, a children's team, an environmental services team. There's a general view that everyone works 50%. That's the kind of overarching. But the schools team are out at the schools practically all the time, so they're never in the office, and that has caused tension with other teams. That we're expected to be in the office 50%, and we're just managing that, and we're just having to evolve and learn to live with it. And that's but it's a different management style than I've ever had, and I think that's been a challenge as well. We're asking managers to be managers of a workforce we've never had to manage before. Some people have found it easy, some people are finding it difficult.
And I think it's a really important part, and Leah, I hope you don't mind me saying it because I'm the same as you. We started this journey both preferring to have our staff in the offices for where they needed to be for the right reasons, or in their post because that was delivering the service. But what this journey's taught us is that you can slightly flip around the inputs to the outputs and measures, but you also need your staff and employees to support with that journey, right? There needs to be this balance of, it can't just be HR. HR help and support and guide, but it's back to the managers who are managing the people that need to remember that they're representing that organization and cascading that comms up and down. I know you're really passionate about that at the next step, aren't you?
Absolutely, and our managers have been amazing. And the staff have, and I think everyone should at some point, you would love everyone to just take a step back and just almost have an opportunity to reflect on what has happened. The ask and what has happened during the last 18 months has been nothing short of amazing. I'm now moving into a slightly different phase with a lot of this I'm fine. COVID just has now become business as usual. It's a bolt on to the day job. Yeah. Sometimes it peaks, sometimes you might not deal with it for ages. At the minute, as we're going into winter and the winter pressures around adult social care and the health sector, it's causing a bit more noise in the system, and we're having to refine that. But if you could just take a step back and look at what we've done and that journey we've been on, it is nothing short of incredible. And some of the stories I could share with you that we, of redeploying staff into roles that they've never done before. We've had people who have left jobs that were in and have become apprentices in stuff that they were redeployed in. They're literally retraining in their careers. So yes, it's been tough. Would I do it again? Absolutely not. But I guess where I'm moving to now in my space is we have a very tired workforce. And even for myself, my energy levels are at kind of the low. Even when I have a week off and I've not been, I've not gone on holiday. Lots of people have not gone on holiday for 2 years or whatever. There's a tiredness and there's a bit of a fatigue and there's a bit of a here we go again kind of thing. And that for me is the next real challenge of how we engage with our work or continue to engage with our workforce, how we support the health and well-being of our workforce. Because if I'm feeling it, I know the management team I work with are feeling it, then you can be sure that the people on the front line are feeling it. And we need to just have that constant communication channels to make sure that we're getting the early warning signals. We don't want people to go off sick because by that point it's too late.
Yeah. And that was why I was really excited to work with yourself and Bolton in those principles of everything's about iteration. It used to be stop and start in terms of that annual survey. You could do that because it was a similar thing. But what we found that works best in place for organizations is you can let your agile environment, whether that is how you structure your days or your benefits or your support around how people want to work to support work-life balance, but that has to feed into that framework of what we were saying before, which is measuring, sense checking and pulse checking and listening to those employee bits of feedback. Because when you go on a walk without a map, you're bound to get lost, and sometimes you'll run down the hill and enjoy it, and sometimes you'll hit a pond and have to go back. But if you're waiting for everyone just to turn up at the end of that walk, like you say, a lot of people won't get there. And that's where that retention challenge comes in, that sickness and attrition rates come through. So it's about that, getting that framework of comms, feeding that back into yourself. And then, like you say, empowering the managers back with that 360-degree loop of continual message and flow of what we're doing.
And some of the challenges that we're finding back from staff at the minute through the comms and the engagement are really difficult things for us to fix and square off. So 10 years ago, the council made a significant investment in reimagining the town hall where I work, and we knocked all our offices down. We have a beautiful open plan office, which worked pre-pandemic, where we had a collaborative space where everyone came together. Actually, in terms of hybrid working, it is causing us no end of headache now, because you've got people who are coming in for physical meetings, then having to do Teams meetings, and imagine in a HR setting, some of those team meetings are not appropriate to be had in an open plan office. We don't have many office spaces because they were all knocked down. So we're now having to reimagine the workplace again. What does that look like moving forward? And they are not quick and easy things to fix. There's a significant cost investment to some of that. So how do we engage and motivate the workforce to do that? And we're having to just literally challenge. It's a constant daily challenge of that. How do we do this? How do we do it? And that's where the digital theme comes in. It's where we have an accommodation theme. All those kind of things feed in.
And I think that's really, really important in terms of building your strategy as you go. Like you say, it's not so much the policy of this is the way of working, but it's just layering and also removing some of those bits of strategy to keep relevant as you're going through those different steps. So even when you're looking back and saying, what did we do then? There was validation of that journey and justification.
Yeah. And sometimes, and we have had to take backward steps to move forward. And that's really uncomfortable, because staff, why are we doing that? We used to do that 5 years ago. Yeah, well, we did, because actually now where we are, that was actually a better way of working. So we are having to unpick some things that we've done previously, but in the long run will hopefully make more sense. But again, it is a lot of the unknown at the minute.
There's a really good question just coming from Jackson Dallas at the top. So where I work, there is definitely a worry that agile working could lead to overworking and tiredness. Have you done anything to prevent this or thought about that particular challenge that might come?
Yeah, real practical steps that we've taken. And I mean, this is so every time we've set our core hours now so it's difficult in the council because we have 24-hour services. But in the main, what we've said is core hours are 7 in the morning till 7 at night. That's the kind of core business hours. So if you look to send an email outside of those times, there is a message that flashes up that says, it's like an insights thing that says, look, can you just consider sending this? And what happens if you say yes, send tomorrow? It'll almost sit in a holding pen till 7 o'clock and do that. So that was one practical. This is all from staff feedback that we've got. So we're just trying to make some change. The other thing is when we use Microsoft Teams as our default meeting thing, when you set up a Teams meeting, the default meeting times are generally 30 minutes or 60 minutes. We've got ICT to change that, so they're now 25 minutes or 50 minutes. So it gives people a 5-minute break, because I know Mike mentioned it, I'd literally been back to back on Teams meetings since about 9:30 this morning. So I literally can I just grab a glass of water before we start? I'm just, because there's no, so we're doing that. In terms of burnout, the other thing that we're doing, we've done a significant investment around health and well-being. So we've got mental health first aiders. We're rolling out digital champions, and the digital champions will also be digital mental health first aiders, so people will be able to communicate and do some of that. We've put numerous team briefings out, staff communications about saying, look, we are now in a business as usual operation. And I get it. It's too easy to work from home. I did it last night. I logged in and I thought, and before you know it's 10:30 at night, and I'm back in the office at 7 o'clock this morning, and you think, oh, back here again. And from a HR perspective, I'm really uncomfortable with that. And as I keep saying to my team, what is the extra work? Why is everyone having to do it? Because in all honesty, I could work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There'd still be something else I need to do. And that for me is as a manager is I'm having to have conversation with my management team about these are our priorities, and it's a different management style for me that I'm used to. It is kind of I'm a very flexible kind of let staff get on with it, let them almost generate their own work, and with a view around health and well-being. But now I'm being far more prescriptive about saying these are our targets this week, this month, this next 6 months. That's what we're focusing on. And I found this journey really difficult. I'll be completely honest. At times, I felt like a dinosaur because I really struggle to adapt to agile working. I've been in the office every day. Mike knows this. I don't personally like working from home. That's a personal choice. But I struggled with not having a team around me. I found, and I think people have felt very lonely and very isolated, and even just things like, I could just do with running this by someone. Can I just sense check this? There's no one to sense check it with, and I think that's part of the bit around the new management techniques that we're having to have is those check-ins with staff, making sure that you're doing that part, because we have lost it over the table conversation.
Yeah, and I think Jack's not sure what size of organization it is, but a lot of the points that Lee resonates with, up to 9,000 employees working in different environments. We have 11 within Stribe currently full time, but some of these challenges still resonate where, how do we make sure we've put in every part of agile and hybrid working that you can imagine. Our team can work how they want, when they want. There's some core hours to be available, but there's no pressure there. It's just respect and trust one another. And for me, it came back down to that realization of that you employ your people to do your work. And as long as the framework's in place and you trust your people to get on with it, great things will happen. And they will know if they feel trusted and listened to, they'll approach you more. They will talk to you more. And I think back to the point of yes, absolutely, agile working could lead to overworking and tiredness, but that would come as a prevention of not having those communication loops in place, not having management who are trusting their employees or continuing. And I think, like Lee said there, when you're at the top of the tree, you still need someone effectively to check in on you and make sure that you're okay. Otherwise, it does become that gap of loneliness. And what we tend to find is as managers and leaders, we push out and we push out and we push out. And then the employees don't feel comfortable to talk to us or share those concerns because they feel that have a direct effect on their role, on their opportunity in their future. And I think that's a key barrier. I'm not sure if you agree in terms of how we build up that trust again and bring people back to those water cooler moments, even if it is virtually, or they feel like they can open up on a Zoom or a call.
Yeah, and I just one other I thought after I'd said one of the challenges or the big challenges, and this is happening and resonates with me right now because we've had a number of staff leave over the last few weeks for a variety of reasons, and we've took on some new staff. And now there's been a challenge. How do you integrate someone into the culture and the organisation when you're not working or they're not sitting with the team that they're working with? And that, again, it's a new skill set that we're just kind of learning on the job as much as anything. And one of the team in particular is finding that exceptionally difficult. They've come into a job where they've been thrown in at the deep end and there's no one really to ask any questions to. So, you know, part of my thing is, right, well, that team then needs to be in for a period of time. Now, that's not gone down brilliantly, but we're having to manage a bit on the, you know, so whilst that person beds in for the next month, I would want someone from that team in the office every single day to sit with that person. And that's what I mean, we're just refining it as we go along on some of it. Yeah.
I'm conscious of time, and if anybody has got any other questions to ask Lee, please do start to put them in. But I'd like to move to a couple of final questions, specifically around kind of your advice, Lee. I know you briefly touched on terms of the guiding principles, and you're going to see how this happens. For someone that's thinking, I'm pushing against leadership here, agile working is the right thing to do, but there's lots of reasons why it might not be right coming back from the leadership. What would you do? What would be your first steps to do? How would you implement something like an agile working framework?
Well, my first advice is don't get a job in HR. Well, that's probably yeah, no. What would my advice be? If I guess I think first, my biggest thing is you've got to engage with the workforce. It needs to be a bottom-up approach for me. I've seen it done too many, and it happens, and I'm as guilty as anyone for it. Is we make decisions for the right reasons, a leadership team, of what we think should happen, and that doesn't necessarily engage with the staff or resonate with the staff underneath. And I think that's what we need to do, is to strip out hierarchies and literally just have a bottom-up approach on some of this. What works, what doesn't work, what would make life better, what are the barriers to coming to work, what are the barriers to working at home, and refine some of that. My biggest things I would often say is, don't be scared of getting it wrong. Have the courage in your convictions that what you're doing is right, but be brave and strong enough to hold your hands up and say, do you know what, it's not quite worked that, and refine it, because things go wrong in all aspects of life. And also remember, and I keep coming back to this, and I'm quoting our Director of Public Health, but it has resonated with me, is we have an ability to look back with rose-tinted glasses that it was better previously. And actually, I looked in, you know, we had challenges before COVID, we had challenges years and years ago. You've got to just try and pick out the good bits of each of the things. So that'd be one thing. I will go back to what I said before, is now is the time for experimenting, not decisions. And that links back to the, you know, don't worry about getting it wrong. And I think if you work in a big organisation like ours, my biggest thing is do not leave anyone behind on this journey. Don't be town hall centric. It's as important that I get flexible working or engagement right for the person that works for an hour a day in the morning as it is for the chief exec. It doesn't matter to me. If you work for Bolton Council, engagement is equally as important. So just make sure that you take everyone on that journey.
I think that's really good and important advice. And I'm scribbling down lots of notes here, Lee, and kind of reading them back. But I think understanding your people's needs within how they work and within that business structure is really, really important. And I think you're doing a brilliant job of this, but you absolutely can have different patterns in how staff work dependent on different units. The important part is it's comms as to the why to different teams, so you don't get that segregated culture of why they're doing X versus Y. It's back to that comms piece, isn't it?
And I think the key word in that for me is, well, there's the comms piece, the culture piece is the key word for me in that, because as a council, and I'm sure this is replicated across many organisations, is we've always been very uneasy with the idea of having different rules for different bits of we've got a rule book, and that applies to everyone. And what we're saying now is, well, actually, no, we don't want that rule book. We want a new rule book that has a load of flexibility. And that'll come with a set of challenges and staff. But you're talking about unpicking. Well, I've worked in local government 23 years now. You're unpicking probably 50 years worth of terms and conditions and how people are brought up and what they know almost. So that is not an easy challenge. But you need to have the conversations. can I just say one last thing, which I think is really, really, and this is something, and it's happened in the last week. I do outside of work. So this was something that happened during COVID. Whilst everyone was working hard on COVID, I thought I need to do something and put something back into the community in terms of that. So I've signed up and I'm a mentor for a lot of young people. So people at sixth form or university colleges, and it's HR stuff, getting into the workplace, and I do a lot of work around that. And I did some interviews with people last week. So these are kind of top students who are going to Oxford University, Cambridge University, Durham University, straight A-star people, absolutely blew me away. It was the best hour of my work I've done for such a long time. But the one thing that really struck me, and I said, what is your biggest worry about the future? And it was agile working. Because the young people I spoke to, and admittedly, I'm in a very small sample size, but I spoke to other people who were doing this, and it was a recurring theme. Hated homeschooling. They found it very isolating. They didn't enjoy it. They missed people and all, and we are built. And I just think we need to be very mindful of. We will create a structure that it has to work for everyone, and it has to work for the future workforce as well. And it was just something I learned that I just thought, well, we're looking at what our current staffing are saying is important to them. I've never even thought about it actually. They'll be, we have an aging workforce. If they all retire in the next 10 years and we're getting, and what we've designed is then not fit for purpose, we're walking straight into a bit of a bear trap. And that would be the one bit of reflection I would say that I've took away from the last couple of weeks, is that agile working's fine, but it has its challenges, and we need to understand what the future workforce would want as well.
I think it's such an important point, Lee. This is all interconnected with kind of engagement and well-being of people at the core, which is underpinned by how the culture can be represented across the workforce. And ultimately, it comes down to those people in your workforce, in the conversations in the pub, in the local community, anywhere where you may be looking to attract talent as we grow, regardless of your sector and your role. If those people are not openly saying, this is a great place to work because of these things, or we understand what's expected of us, but there are some clear boundaries that we can work how we want to, then you're not going to hire the next generation. It's going to be a real difficult challenge. As you just said there, if we don't get the agile balance right, or any form of working that is inclusive for everyone to come into roles, people are going to go elsewhere. And we're going to have a bigger challenge in terms of filling the roles, let alone retaining the roles. So all of these conversations, I think the thing that I really wanted to pull out for our audience today is a little bit of just reminding people that we are on this unknown journey. And I know you've said this perfectly in terms of we don't have all the answers. Agile working is a way in which we can start to try something and give a bit more flexibility to support people's work-life balance. But we're finding out what the measures are. But one thing that we have to keep doing is communicating and feeding back to our staff in microcycles, weekly, monthly, rather than annually, so we can change if we need to suit the different groups of people.
Absolutely. And that is exactly where we do, or trying to do what we do around with Stribe and the other tools that we have, is getting that insight and being able to refine things. And like I say, is just don't be wedded to one thing. And I've set off on a number of things with an idea in my head of how we're going to get from A to B. And before you know it, the path's gone off on a different direction. You still get to B, you still get to where you want to be. It might take you different ways, but if staff feel as though they've been involved in that journey, it would generally pan out better, I find, than almost like you're telling them what happens to them.
Absolutely. Lee, I'm going to summarize if I may, but thank you so much for all of your points. And I hope you as the audience have found that insightful, maybe comforting, or if you're just at the start of the journey, just giving you the confidence to ultimately try something. There's agile working made up in many different days. It can be fixed on days to come in the office. It can be completely flexible. It can be the hours that they work. But ultimately, particularly for the organizations, you've got to make it clear to your people about what their duty is, what their role is, what their organization is expecting from them, and then build that around what they're ultimately delivering as part of their journey, and be really, really clear with people. And I would ultimately say, however you're going to ask your staff and communicate with them, do that before you put the agile system in place, because what you'll have is a validation to take back to leadership or to colleagues to say, this is what the people are asking for. And if you follow that journey and you try that, it's going to give you a better chance of engaging your people as part of that journey. And there's lots of technology in place, like Stribe, for example, that allows you to regularly measure and look back and ask your people whether that has worked for them. And you already have your measures in place in terms of staff attrition rates or stress-related absence rates. So like Wigan Lee College, the more you listen to your people and the more you implement the things that they've talked about, then ultimately the better the results can be, and staff retention increases and stress-related absence decreases, because people want to be in the environment of work, however they're working. I think there's a really important piece for every organization to think about, regardless of size, whether that's 9,000 employees or 11 employees, is how we empower our managers, because they're at the middle of this. They're looking up, they're looking down, they're looking left, they're looking right. So that messaging, that communication, and that structure has to be really, really clear. And particularly, as Lee said, from the top-down approach, getting these processes in place that as you implement new things, there's some evidence and support, there's some programs, there's some resources, there's some training that helps people to understand, and don't rush these things. Digital transformation has sped up, but once you've chosen the technology you want to put in place, work at your pace to embed this in your people's place to ultimately get that right. And I think the bit that I loved the most was guiding principles for an agile workforce. I think, don't worry too much about writing a 100-page strategy and plan that says this is the only way it's going to work today. Have some guiding principles that are really, really simple for everybody, the most remote and diverse parts of your workforce, that can digest via a paper note, via an email, via an app, however that works, so that ultimately they get why you're doing something and how that's coming through. There is a tired workforce in place, but again, I think you can identify that, as Lee and I have discussed. Being able to look at different services, different departments, and different roles based upon their feedback allows you to remove that one shoe size fits all approach that we've all lived through for a long period of time. And I think that's really, really important.